So, hello and welcome. I'm Sorrel Pindar, and today this is a masterclass called Speak, Listen, Ask, Empowered Communication for Women. And this is a School of Humankind masterclass. The School of Humankind being an organization which is kind of global. We have people in the US, Canada, Europe, which includes the UK, even though sometimes I think we don't. And it's co-directed by Angela Jameson and John Britton. And I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint today, so I'm actually going to stop sharing and come back to some slides as and when I need them. So I'm going to start just by welcoming everyone to this masterclass and explaining why this is important. A little bit about me. I'm going to talk about the 5 losing strategies, which really let us down in our communication. And I'm going to talk about trying something different. And then I'm going to, at the end, well, not quite at the end, but, I shall then come on to speaking, listening, and asking, having kind of set the stage, and how to be successful in your communication. And at the end, I'll just mention a little thank you offer. Thank you for being here. So why is this important? Well, first of all, for couples, the divorce rate, generally speaking, in recent years has been around 50%. It's dropped recently because people can no longer afford to get divorced. So they end up staying together and hating each other, which is probably worse than getting divorced, although less expensive. And having spent 2 years living separated from my ex-husband in the same house with him, I know how ghastly that can be. The other thing is that when we get into dysfunctional patterns of communication, they can go on for a long time. I mean, people talk about 40 years of the same repeating patterns, and they transmit through generations as well. So I know that I'm a shouter. Well, I'm not so much as I used to be, but I was a shouter because my mother was a shouter. I don't know about her mother. Her mum was my nanny. My grandma was very lovely with me, but maybe she had been a shouter when my mum was little. The next thing is that, if you want to see some change, if you want other people to change, you have to be the change you want to see, which is a direct quote from Gandhi, who was obviously a very wise man. But the other thing I want to talk about is that this is about changing the way we think about power. It's not just about communication, it's about power and power relations. So why would I be a good person to talk to about all this stuff? Well, first of all, it's actually isn't that funny really, but I am a veteran of 3 pretty disastrous relationships. The last one being my ex-husband. And we have 2 daughters, so they've had some of the fallout from our divorce. But I am now in a relationship where I do everything very differently and very consciously, and it's been very successful. We've been together just over 5 years now, and we've never argued, which I think is pretty cool. I'm also a boarding school survivor. I went to school at the age of 11, and I was there till I was 18. And what I've learned, particularly in recent years, is how the patterns that I created as a child, when I was 11, 12, 13, they stuck with me through my life until I started to recognize them as a kind of a survival personality. And actually unpicking those and dismantling those patterns is really important for getting my relationships to work. So I'm a relationship and well-being coach. I'm a specialist training in working with women, so women's coaching, with an organization called One of Many. And I'm nearing the end of training to work with couples. I just have to stop procrastinating and submit my final piece for assessment, which is quite funny, really. The classic pattern is, I know what I'm doing, I know what I have to do, and I haven't done it yet, and I'm afraid of failing. So that's something it's a personal thing, isn't it? And I've been working with couples since January last year. So I work sometimes one-to-one and sometimes with a couple. So today, what I'm going to talk about in this masterclass is, again, those 5 listening strategies, a technique which allows us to be relationally mindful. So we can actually stop ourselves in our tracks, as it were, and become mindful of how what we're about to do is going to affect our relationship. I'm going to talk about soft power as opposed to hard power. I'm going to talk about having common cause, and I'll explain it when I get to it, and then speaking, listening, and asking for what you want. So I am going to share again, because I'd like you to see the next slide. So can you see that? Thumbs up if you can see it. Great, thank you. So there are 5 losing strategies, and I'm going to talk you through them. The first one is needing to be right, and I am really familiar with this because this was probably my chief losing strategy most of my life. And it only really occurred to me when I got together with my current partner, Mark, that I had to be right all the time. And then I thought, well, I can't possibly be right all the time, can I? Just logically, that's not a thing. So the thing about needing to be right is first, there's 2 things really. First of all, is having to prove that you're right and they're wrong, which isn't actually very relational. And as Terry Real, the guy I'm doing my training with to work with couples, as he says, in a marriage or a relationship, the answer to the question who is right and who is wrong is who cares? It's not important. What's important is that you allow yourselves to have different ideas and to disagree about things, and then come together as a couple. So I know that Mark and I can disagree about things, and we don't get upset about it anymore. In fact, we did a little bit at the start, and he very lovingly pointed out that I had to be right all the time, and it was probably a boarding school thing, and that helps kind of, it's a little bit less painful when you know where it's come from. The second losing strategy is trying to control your partner. So, okay, take us as an example, because I'm quite familiar with the things in our relationship. So he drinks a lot of coffee, and sometimes I think, oh, surely it can't be good for you to drink that much coffee. And it's probably about 6 mugs a day, maybe more sometimes. But I've never once said to him, I think it's a bad idea to drink that much coffee. It's up to him to decide whether or not it's a bad idea. And I know he's been drinking coffee since he was about 7 years old, or maybe even younger than that. So I suspect all of his coffee receptors in his body are down-regulated anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I can see Angela laughing at that one. So trying to control your partner by trying to get them to drink less, smoke less, go to sleep earlier, empty the dishwasher, take the bins out, all of those things. Taking the bins out on time is such a classic one. People don't like being controlled, and quite often they end up retaliating, which is obviously not what you're looking for. The third losing strategy is unbridled self-expression, and I know I've been guilty of this as well in the past. It's where you're angry or you're upset, or perhaps you're even grieving about something, and you just empty it all out onto your other half. So it's like almost like there's an inability to regulate your own emotions, so you dump it. So I think of that as the dump truck approach to emotional regulation, which again, it's very uncomfortable for the person on the receiving end, and it's not relational. And there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, I'm really feeling quite sad today, without bringing everything out. And it is about learning to regulate your own emotions. So the fourth losing strategy is retaliation, which is obviously not a good thing. And that doesn't matter whether you're really angry because, I don't know, your wife had made you dinner and it was too late and you were hungry, or whether it's because you felt you've been victimized and therefore you're fighting back. It's still retaliation, and it's still a losing strategy because it doesn't work. And the point about all these things is they don't work. That's what's so important about it. And the fifth thing is withdrawal. And I know when I was with my ex, he'd come into the kitchen and rant at me, and I would just turn my back on him and do the washing up. And he hated that. It allowed me to distance myself from him a little bit. But again, it wasn't relational. There probably would have been much better ways of responding to his rants, but I hadn't yet worked out what they were. So that's the 5 losing strategies, and I'm now going to stop sharing. And just talk to you a little bit about where all this stuff comes from. So why do we do this? The losing strategies and a lot of other behavior patterns are things that we developed as children to keep us safe. So if you grew up in a household where there was a lot of arguing, or for that matter, if you went to boarding school, you will have created behavior patterns that kept you safe and protected you in that situation. And it was really the wisest, cleverest thing to do as a child. But as an adult, it doesn't work. Because we talk about these as the adaptive child. So these behavior patterns which the adaptive child created they're not designed to bring people in close. They're not designed to connect with other people. They're designed to keep you safe in a kind of a very separate sort of way. But they tend to be our knee-jerk reaction when we get triggered. And so obviously the trick is to find something different to replace them with. So again, I love quoting Terry Real because he says some very clever things. And one of his favorite quotes is, or one of my favorite quotes of his is, what is your enemy? More of the same. What is your friend? Something different. So it's like, look for the something different. So the first, I'm going to talk through 3 different winning strategies that you can use to replace those losing strategies. And the first one is something called the ABC method. It's a way of practicing relational mindfulness. And you may already have come across the ABC method in other contexts. So this is a specific application of it. So A stands for awareness or acknowledgement. So you become aware that you're about to say something passive aggressive, for instance. And as you become aware of that fact, you take a breath to create a pause. That's your B for breath. And then C is for choose something different. And what we're talking about here is choosing something we call second consciousness, which basically means coming from your adult self rather than your adaptive child self. And that allows you to be relational and to connect with your partner. So I'm going to move on to power for a moment. If you think about the old-fashioned patriarchal model of power, just do what I tell you to, or you're going to get it kind of thing. In a family, that would probably be, hopefully, and that could even be the case in a business, and it could be your boss talking to you that way. So what we're talking about here is sort of that old-fashioned model of power, which is power over. We're talking about soft power. And soft power there's kind of 2 kinds. There's power so I have the power to do something. So right now I have the power to go outside and wander around my garden. I'm not going to do that because I'm giving a masterclass, but I could go out there afterwards and water my pots. But then the other sort is power with. So the power with is the power I have to do something with somebody else. So I have the power to organize a holiday with my partner, or I have the power, I'm going to tie myself in knots now. So I have power with my daughters as well to organize things with them. And the thing about a soft power with is it assumes that we have common cause. Common cause is so important. When you recognize you've got common cause, then relational communication becomes really, you have it's motivation to do it. So for instance, if you're looking for common cause in a marriage, it could be the welfare of your children. You might want to make sure as a couple that your children are happy at school, for instance. It might be planning a holiday. Well, it might be the future of your marriage. It might be you sit down and think, what, the way things are going, we'll be divorced by the end of this decade. We need to do something about it. So your common cause could be that you've decided you want to stay together and you want to make it work. So when you've decided that you've got that common cause, then your next step is to cherish the relationship itself and to cherish your partner. So this is about moving out of me and you, where I want what I want and you want what you want. And let's see if we can figure out a way that we can both have what we want, into us, where it's about what do we want as a couple. And yeah, there's going to be a bit of me and you in there as well, but the us is really important. And if you want to be in a relationship, you've got to be relational, which means you've got to step out of that adaptive child response, which is mostly about me, into that second consciousness adult response, which is about being in connection and being in a relationship. And that means cherishing your partner and putting your relationship center stage. And that brings us back to the whole relational mindfulness thing, that we are it's like constantly keeping a relationship at the front of your mind, as opposed to it being kind of like, something you thought about afterwards when it was too late. So I'm going to come on to speaking, listening, and asking. And I called this empowered communication for women because when you're talking to men, it's different from when you're talking to women. You could turn this on its head, actually. but you've got to go. I've decided to do it this way around. So let's just assume that you've got a problem and you're going to take it to your other half, your male partner, and you don't want him to give you advice and you don't want him to give you solutions. You just want him to listen while you offload without engaging in unbridled self-expression. Because remember that kind of do a bit of container as well. So if you want him to just listen and not give you a solution, you've got to tell him that's what you want. A number of times I've had women complain to me about, oh, but all he does is give me a solution. And I don't want a solution. I just want to be listened to and heard. And say, okay, so did you tell him that? Oh, no. So you could just kind of, before you even start speaking, like, I've got a problem, I want to talk about it, but I just want you to listen. So that's the speaking thing. There are other things about speaking. This is a very specific thing. The listening thing is actually your second winning strategy. So when we give the gift of listening to others, they appreciate it. And then that means, listening with all of your attention. And actually it starts with paying attention in the first place, rather than giving them a brush off and saying, oh, no, I'm too busy. Sometimes you will have to say, I'm sorry, I really can't talk. I can't do that now. Let's take a rain check. But how about, 6:30 tonight or something? But if you can possibly do it now, do it now. And then listen with nothing else on your mind. So you're not thinking what advice to give. You're not thinking about what solutions there might be to the problem. You're not thinking about what they've left out or what they've got wrong or what you disagree with. You are just purely listening. And I tell you, it's hard and it takes practice. And we all slip back. We constantly find it. Oh, no, I'm thinking about a solution again, aren't I? But then you just bring yourself back to paying attention to what that person's saying. So we call that deep listening or compassionate listening or active listening. They're all much the same. And then when you've done that a couple of times, your other half will feel heard and cared for and cherished. And that's why it's a winning strategy. And the final thing on the speak, listen, ask is how to ask for things. And again, how to ask men for things. And actually, do you know what? I'm going to share this one because it's a little bit more complicated. Just a moment. First thing to do is to get his attention. And then ask him, is this a good time to talk? Because people don't like being interrupted. And sometimes it's not a good time to talk because if they start talking now, they're going to lose the plot of what they were doing before. They're going to lose their thread. They're going to lose where they were. And if he says no, actually, then you set a time. So just say, okay, how about if we talk this evening or something? And then tell him what you need from him. And let him come up with a solution. So it's like, don't go to somebody. I've had people do this to me. They come with a problem they want me to give them some advice or a solution, and then they tell me what they think the solution is. And actually, that's really irritating. So don't tell him how to do it. And when he comes to doing it, don't micromanage him. And I wanted to give you an example from my own experience. This is quite a funny story, and it's quite a lovely story. So I have some rather old fences in my garden, side of my garden. I don't know how long they've been there, but they are gradually falling to pieces. And a couple of years ago in the winter, the fence at the back, it just literally fell apart. All the feathers fell off, the patterns had split, and they'd rotted away. I came down one morning and my fence was all in pieces in the neighbour's garden. So Mark, my partner, used to be a landscape gardener, and I knew that he'd done fencing. So I said to him, oh, do you think we could put any fence in there? And he said, well, no, I don't think so, because there's a tree in the way. And there's a tree that arches over the fence. He said, but that's okay, but I can repair it for you. So I thought, oh, that's nice. Never thought of that. He said, and it won't cost you anything. And I said, oh, even better. So I said, so how are you going to do it then? He said, oh, it's okay. I'll go surf skipping and I'll find the bits and pieces that I need and then I'll repair it. So I thought, great. So in the next few weeks, the bits and pieces started to appear. And he just salvaged stuff from all over the place. And I waited and I waited. And I waited and I thought, oh, this is actually going to happen. And I had this pressure to say to him, when are you going to do it? When are you going to fix the fence, Mark? But I knew that that wouldn't be clever. So I just zipped my lip and waited some more. And then one day he said, I think I'm going to need to buy a new hammer. Okay, fine. So he went out and he bought a new hammer because I've got my dad's old toolkit, which is from probably circa 1940 something. And he decided my hammer wasn't up to the job. So he went and bought a new hammer. And then we were waiting for the weather to get just right. So the wood would be not too damp, not too wet, not too dry. And then he did it. And I asked him, number 5, ask what you can do to help. So I said, is there anything I can do to help? And he said, oh, I suppose you could just hand me up some screw nails while I'm banging them in. So then we were in the neighbour's garden and I was being the magician's assistant, handing him his nails and then say thank you. But the main thing is don't nag. And I didn't nag. And I tell you, it was an interesting experience to just kind of not go in there and keep saying, oh, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? So that's asking. So I want to say one more thing, which is kind of related to all of this, which is about how we talk about our feelings. So most of us assume that our feelings are a direct result of what somebody has said or done to us. So we'll say something like, God, you make me so angry when you, whatever. Or you've upset me because of whatever. But Anil Seth, who is an amazing neuroscientist, who has his thing is about how we create our experience in our minds, in our brains. So he said, upset and resentment are a reflection of our own thoughts and can therefore never be caused by anyone or anything outside of ourselves. It's all about what we made their behavior mean and how we interpreted their actions. So there is, I am going to keep my slides up one more time and then take it. No, 2 more slides and I'll take it down again. So winning strategy number 3 is owning your shit, which means you speak from I rather than you. So instead of saying, oh, you make me so angry when you do that, you can say, I feel angry when you do that. And that way you're not returning anger with anger, you're not offending from the position of victim, and you're not blaming them for your feelings. You're remembering that you are the creator of your own feelings. And there is a way of asking someone to change their behavior in light of the way you feel about it, which doesn't put it in their court, as it were. And that's something called the feedback wheel. This is a skill that we teach couples who've kind of done most of the work of learning relational mindfulness. They've done the healing work around what happened to them in their childhood, which led them to create all those losing strategies. So they've got to the point where they're starting to learn new skills. And we call it the feedback wheel. So it's 4 stages. It's very simple. The first thing is to say, this is what I recall happening. So for instance, what I recall happening is that you forgot to empty the dishwasher this morning. And that may be late for work. And then this is what I made up about it. What I made up about it is that you don't care about me being late for work because you don't think that my work's that important. This is how I felt. I just felt like you don't care about me. And you think my work is pointless and worthless. And this is what would help you feel better. If you can make sure that you empty the dishwasher every morning so I don't have to do it myself. And, maybe even put a reminder on your phone or something. And then, any luck, your partner will agree because you haven't blamed them. You've taken responsibility for your feelings and your thoughts, but you've asked them to change their behavior in such a way that you will feel better. So, whoops, I'm going to stop sharing. So to sum up, the first thing is that we tend to resort to the losing strategies when we're having a bad day. We don't do it all the time. It's on the bad days. And those losing strategies are behavior patterns that we created as children to keep us safe. And we call them adaptive child behaviors because it's the adaptations that we made to protect ourselves. And we can swap them out for more relational ways of communicating, particularly using the ABC method, because that's kind of your way in. And there is an art to speaking and listening and asking. And I've got the 3 winning strategies as a nice little summary. When you get triggered, use the ABC method to move yourself into second consciousness, into your adult consciousness. Listen deeply when your partner wants to speak to you so they feel heard and cherished. And speak from I. So I feel this when you're upset or angry. And use the feedback wheel so you can say, I feel angry when you do that. And that is the end of my masterclass. I've got an offer which ends on Saturday at midnight. I think what it is, it's a 3-session, so 3 coaching sessions for either one-to-one or for a couple to kind of get you started on the road. So we would look at things like what your losing strategies are, what's the dances that you engage in with each other. It's a little bit like A does something, B does something else in response to that. A does the third thing in response to what B just did. And you end up in a kind of a dance that repeats over and over again. And the objective is, if you think about it as a foxtrot, for instance, if you want to end the foxtrot, start doing the tango. Your partner cannot continue doing the foxtrot when you're starting to tango. I have to say, I can't do either of those dances, so I think I'd be rubbish at this. But anyway, so that's part of the that's the first stage, and the second stage is working on some of those childhood experiences and doing a little bit of inner child work. And between those, the kind of the assessment and the figuring out what the dance is and doing the inner child work, that's probably what you're going to get on those three sessions. I normally charge £495 for those 3 sessions, and until midnight on Saturday, it's only £95. Yes. And I can put a link in the chat for anybody who would like to have a look at the sales page. The idea of this is that it just kind of gets you started, and it gets you thinking more. It's that common cause thing, getting you thinking along the lines of common cause, so that you can start to connect better with each other, connect more deeply, and it's kind of like teamwork on working on your communication style, so that, like when Mark said to me, oh, you need to be right all the time, don't you, Sorrel? But don't worry, it's because of boarding school. It's like, okay, that's helping me deal with my issue. And he has things that I've helped him with, but we do it as teamwork, and we do it because we have common cause, which is we want to stay together. I'm not doing any more relationships after this one. So I think that's about enough today. I am going to stop recording. And thank you for coming along.